Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today I'm going to be taking a look at the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition 03 Voyager class Optimus Prime. Let's start off by taking a look at the packaging and then we'll get into the review. So of course up front we have Transformers on the side and open wide displaying the figure. In the packaging we have the War for Cybertron video game logo. There's a huge artwork shot or picture shot of Optimus Prime based on his design from the War for Cybertron video game. We actually have a little game controller button. It's actually the forward and back arrow and the side to side arrow as well, which I think is a really nice detail that they really didn't have to do. We have 03, so this is the third figure, a part of the Studio Series subline called the Gamer Edition. There's actually several other figures that they've revealed and are to come, and of course I'll review those on the channel whenever I get them. We also have Studio Series at the bottom with Optimus Prime, the Gamer Edition logo, and a very classic Optimus symbol done in white silver. If you actually do look at the top, we have the War for Cybertron video game again with that same game controller button. If we do look at the side, we actually have him in kind of a running battle pose with, of course, that game controller button at the top, which I think looks pretty cool. And on the side, we have a close-up of his chest and face, and we actually have 03 and of course the game controller button, and we have Voyager class in several different languages with Studio Series on the side, and of course on the back he transforms in 22 steps. There's actually several product shots, so there's one of him and his robot, his Cybertronian tank alt mode. There's one of him, of course, with his chest open. You can actually remove the matrix from his chest, which I think is a pretty cool feature. And there's actually him displayed with the backdrop. So since this is a Studio Series figure, all of these figures will come with a really cool backdrop. For him, it's actually the Kaon prison break, which I think is pretty cool. There's actually a brief bio right here that I'm going to read for you. So it says, Optimus Prime enacts a plan to be captured by the Decepticons in an effort to save Zeta Prime, which I think is a pretty cool little description. I'm assuming probably every figure a part of the subline will have one, and I will make sure to read them off to you. And I will show off that backdrop in this review at some point. And that is pretty much it for the packaging, so let's now get into the review. So here we have Optimus Prime in his robot mode. Let's start off by taking a look at the details, starting at the very top with the head sculpt. Really nice blue for the main helmet section, with some silver for the mouth guard and the crest, and there's some blue for the eyes, which I do quite like. I do like the huge, big, beefy shoulders down that dark red with some kind of a lighter orangish red for the Autobot symbols on both sides. I actually do quite like that. And there's some more red, of course, for the forearms, some gray for the biceps, and of course some really nice, well-sculpted hands done in blue, in my opinion. I actually do really like the chest. Tons of really cool angles, really big and bulky. I'm actually really glad how these turned out to be silver, so it could have just been me, but when they first revealed this figure, from the pictures, it really saw, or kind of what I saw is actually these sections were going to be kind of that unfinished gray, but I'm really glad how it turned out to be silver, because this looks a lot better that way. And of course, as for the crotch and stomach, lots of really cool panels, some silver, nice kind of gunmetal gray color, some red for the crotch, and the hips overall looking very cool, and of course the legs really big and beefy and bulky, which I actually do quite like. We actually have some really cool pipes here. These are actually the exhaust, or kind of the smokestack pipes from the other mode, and I kind of like how they end up on the leg. I think that actually looks really cool. And there's some silver on the front of the legs, and of course some blue for the knees and the feet. And if we do look at the side of the figure, overall profile wise, not looking too bad, not much kibble or junk or anything. Of course we do have the wheels back here, but that's actually accurate to how he looked in the video game, so that I really don't have any complaints there. And even if it wasn't accurate, I actually think it looks pretty cool. We have the huge, entire bumper or grill section done in silver, and the huge wheels sticking out. I actually do quite like that. And of course we have the back two on the back of the legs, and not much gaps or emptiness or anything. Overall, a very well done figure in my opinion. So now for articulation, the head can look up and down, side to side, and of course the shoulder can move out and in, forward, back. There is bicep rotation and an elbow bend, and surprisingly there is actually a wrist rotation. I was not expecting that. And I do want to say one thing now. So if you are wondering, because of course this forearm is actually removable, mostly due to the accessory, which I'll show off in just a sec, that entire gimmick. And if you're wondering if that affects the articulation in any way, from what I can tell, the articulation on this arm is the exact same on the other arm. So if you're wondering if it changes or differs at all, it does not. And of course, as for the waist, actually does move all the way around, completely unhindered. I do have to say this is probably one of my main complaints for this figure. I think the waist joint or waist rotation on this copy or on my copy is a bit too loose, so it would have been nice if this was a tad bit tighter. And of course the legs can kick forward, and unfortunately cannot kick back at all due to this flap here. It actually bumps into this hinge, so it cannot kick back at all. There is of course a rotation at the top of the leg. It can kick out, and of course there is also a knee bend, which is pretty good. All very tight joints. Again, the only really main complaint for joint tightness is that waist. And there is also of course an ankle pivot to a pretty good degree. And that is pretty much it for articulation. I think the only thing that they could have done a bit better is, of course, the kickback, which I wouldn't say I use that motion or that feature that much on my figures. The only reason why it is, if you want to see, is there's this entire hinge section back here. It's mostly due to transmission, and you cannot move that out of the way, so it pretty much completely blocks the backward kick. But that is pretty much it for articulation. I think overall pretty good for a Voyager class figure. So let's now get down to his several accessories. Let's actually start off with the Matrix of Leadership. So I'm actually going to open up his chest here, just like that. It can be a bit trouble. There we go. And here it is, and I have to say this looks so good. All the wiring and circuitry detailing. It would have been nice if there was some more paint, because all it is like that black. I do like the sculpting, but it would have been nice if there was like some silver or gunmetal gray, because as it is, it does sometimes just look like a giant blob of, black paint or black plastic. But again, the molding is very impressive, and you can actually remove the matrix, which I was not expecting. Do be careful, because it's very, very tiny, so it's just held on by those two tabs, and of course the port goes into these slots, and there is a, of course, port back there. And this is a completely brand new sculpt, and not like the Earthrise one or, of course, the G2 Laser Optimus Prime one. Completely different, and I actually think that looks super, super cool. Love the orange for the entire, shell section, and some blue for the crystal, and some gray for the handles. So I don't really think you can actually have them hold it. You could probably pull off some crazy poses if you want to, if you have the patience. I really haven't done anything like that yet, but I really like this entire section. I do have to say, when they first revealed this figure, I was not expecting it to be removable. I was actually thinking it was built into the figure, and I'm actually really glad I was wrong. And you can just close this up just like that, and I do like how well compact this is. I mean, if you just glance at this figure right now, would you have actually be able to tell if this chest can open? I don't think so. But now for his other accessories, he actually does come with an axe, which I think looks so cool. So it actually comes packaged, or it actually separates into 3 separate pieces. So the first one is actually the blade itself, which overall looks super cool. So a lot of people do have this same complaint, myself included. Unfortunately, the painting is not the greatest. The sculpting is actually amazing. I really do like how there's 2 separate axe modes. That's super cool. If you don't know, I'm actually a really big fan of melee weapons. I love shields and axe with Transformer figures. It always turns out really good, especially with Optimus. You can put him in some really cool poses. If you want to see the intro, of course, make sure you go back. I put a lot of really cool pictures in the intro. Yeah, so overall, sculpting-wise is good, but they really should have done more paint. I think they were trying to do kind of a glowing effect, because if you play the War or Fall of Cybertron video game, there's kind of a really cool glowing right energon effect or light effect on a lot of the weapons and the shields, which I really did like, but I really don't think they pulled it off very good here, because there's a lot of this kind of really cheap, kind of unfinished gray. It looks okay, but I think they probably could have done better. And you can actually split the main blade in half, and you can actually form, a huge 2-sided blade section here. I'm not sure the entire, right term for it, but I actually think this looks super cool. I think I probably prefer this form the most. Please do let me know in the comment section down below, of course, of the modes, which one do you like the most? And of course, the other 2 pieces are handle pieces. You can actually have it a bit shorter if you want to, kind of like this. I actually think that looks pretty cool, so you can put it in his hand if you want to, so just kind of wiggle it in place. And there we have the, a bit of a shorter axe, which I actually think looks pretty cool in my opinion. And this handle is long, so you could put it in his hand all the way if you wanted to do a bit shorter. Really just up to you. But of course, there is the third and final piece of part of this axe, which is a nether handle. So you can actually make it really, really long. So you're going to, of course, put it in there just like that. Just wiggle it all the way in, and then you can just plug this in just like that. And there we have the full axe in his hand. I have to say that looks pretty awesome in my opinion. Again, that's probably why I'm so disappointed about the painting of the axe, because of course the sculpting and the look looks amazing. Just the only thing that's really letting it down is just there's not enough paint. It would have been nice if it was more of a red, less of an orange. That's just my opinion, kind of to match the figure itself. But let me know your thoughts on the axe in the comment section down below. Do you think it's fine, or do you agree with my complaints? But overall, that's pretty much it for the axe feature. Again, one last thing you can do, which I kind of already showed, you can again split that front blade in half and kind of have a different form if you want to, which I actually prefer the more simplified look. I actually kind of prefer that. That's just my opinion. And as for the final accessory, it's actually, of course, the blaster. So what you're going to do is, of course, remove the form, crazily enough. Of course, you never expect to do that. And it's just held on via a peg and, of course, a port. And there's actually storage for this. I'm typically most likely just going to leave this off to the side, because the storage for it is a bit odd. So you're actually going to go to the back of the figure. You can actually lift up this entire section here. So there is a port in the back, the same one you use for flight stands, and there is a peg right here, and that's just going to plug right into place just like that. And that's where you're supposed to store the forms. I'm assuming most likely all the other figures a part of this Gamer Edition subline will probably have storage of some sorts like this. But again, I probably won't do this that much because it looks a bit silly. And it'll also limit the articulation even more because there is a knee bend on this figure, but it actually might end up bumping into the entire form on the back. So there is a bit of cost if you want to store it like that. As for the weapon, overall pretty well sculpted. It is kind of plain, of course, really just black. Would have been nice if there was maybe some silver or gunmetal gray paint apps, but overall pretty cool. And I'm pretty sure it is actually blast piece compatible because there is a little post here. So how this stores is there is, of course, a port right there, and there is a peg, and that will just store in there just like that. And there we have Optimus Prime fully geared up, and I have to say this looks absolutely awesome. I have to admit, I really do. When I was taking the pictures for the intro, I had so much fun. There was so many really cool poses. I had a really good fun time doing that. So let's now get down to a few quick comparisons. I'm actually gonna have to move the camera up because this axe is quite massive. So here he is with the Earthrise Optimus Prime. So of course, both Optimus Prime, but two very different designs. This is more G1, of course, this is the Earthrise Leader Class Optimus Prime. This is the Studio Series Gamer Edition Voyager Class Optimus Prime. So as you can see, this figure is actually bigger, which is kind of odd, because for a while now, we've always considered the Earthrise Optimus Prime to be a Voyager, even though it was priced at a Leader. But now, of course, as you can see, it's actually bigger than this one. This one is, of course, quite a bit smaller. It is a Voyager class figure. It's more short and stubby, but pretty bulky. So, you know, it's kind of a matter of taste of how the size and the design of Optimus you actually prefer. I have to say, I think I probably might like the Studio Series Gamer Edition more than this one. That might be crazy to some people because a lot of people love the Earthrise design. I just really like the axe, the blaster, how big and bulky it is. I do understand some people's complaints about the proportions. I was going to mention that. Some people think the head is a bit out of proportion with the body because it's so big and bulky, which that's how he looked in the game. I haven't played the game in quite some time. I actually had the DS War for Cybertron game. I had it a while ago. I can't even remember the last time I played it, but I remember the proportions were a bit off with most of the characters and, of course, the video game, so it's really just accuracy. But of course, I would say it is a valid complaint if you're just taking the accuracy to the game out of the mix. If you're just going by the figure itself, yes, it is kind of out of proportion, but they do look pretty cool side by side. And actually, do let me know in the comment section down below of all the recent, you know, mainline Hasbro Optimus Prime figures, you know, the G2 Laser Optimus Prime, the Earthrise, this Gamer Edition one, which one is your favorite? And now for one final comparison, and of course I will bring out several other Optimuses for comparison in his alt mode. Here he is with the G2 Laser Optimus Prime. Definitely, of course, much taller. This is a leader as well. And he has those huge shoulder pads. And again, I have to say, I think this is a better figure. I just like the design. I just like the accessories more. I don't know. But that is pretty much it for comparison. So let's now get down to transformation. So what you're going to do is actually remove the accessories. So just, of course, put these off to the side. Just kind of wiggle it out of there. And put that off to the side. Just kind of put them in a neutral pose. Take the blaster. Put that off to the side as well. And you're going to, of course, remove the forearm from the back and put that back on his arm. So the typical, of course, peg and port system. Just plug that into place. And there we go. So let's now get down to transformation. You're going to spread the arms all the way out, just like that. And then what you're going to do is actually separate these sections, actually just kind of pull them apart. It's kind of on a slider joint or a slider system. Then what you can do is go to the back here. You're actually going to extend this entire back piece, rotate it around, just like that. And then what you're going to do is rotate these entire sections forward, just like that. And then what you're going to do is collapse this entire section. There will actually be a click. Make sure it clicks, because if you don't, it won't transform correctly. I actually made that mistake one time when I was transforming on my own. And then, of course, just push this head back, because you're actually going to cover this entire assembly right here. So make sure this entire section actually goes over this grill. There is a tab there and a slot, and there is a tab and slots. Same thing on the other side, so just make sure all of this is tabbed into place. It's again on that slider joint, so you just tab everything into place. There you go. And then what you want to do is actually rotate at the waist all the way around, and they're actually going to hinge the legs up all the way, and then let's actually work on the legs. So what you're going to do is actually get these panels. You can actually hinge the entire smokestack piece up. Same thing on the other side. There we go. Hinge that entire smokestack piece up. That's what it looks like. You can actually tab the legs together. There's actually several tabs and slots. You can then bring these panels out like this, and there we go. And then you can actually get the wheels out. They're actually from underneath the legs. These will just tab into place, just like that. And then you can actually collapse the feet in. These will actually form the entire, top part of the truck. And then you can actually hinge this entire assembly a bit down like that. And then what you want to do is go to the shoulders. Make sure, of course, this shoulder section or the Autobot symbol is facing in, not out. That's how you know, of course. You can actually make sure this tab is facing in, just to make sure, of course, you're having it face the right way. So there's actually a slot right here and a tab right there. And then you're going to tab the arms into place like that. Can be a bit tricky to align. There we go. And there is 2 tabs on the arms and of course slots there, and that will just tab into place just like that. And there we go. And then what you want to do is bring these panels down. These will actually tab together, as you can see. Make sure that's nice and secure. And then of course there's actually several connections here. So there's a tab right there and a slot right there, and there is a slot and a tab. And just make sure all that gets lined up. And the same thing on the other side. And there we have Optimus Prime in his huge, big, beefy truck mode. Let's take a look at the details. Here we have Optimus Prime in his Cybertronian truck mode. Let's start off by taking a look at the details. Starting at the very front, we actually have some really nice glossy red plastic here. And I do like all the layers in the panels. Nice silver for the entire grille section or bumper section. And of course on the side we have these huge, big, beefy wheels. I do like the little stripe of red on the inner portion of it. And I actually really like all the indents and the tires to be more realistic, which is pretty cool. I do like all the silver for the inner portion. Of course you have 2 wheels back here with pretty much the same design, of course, just much smaller. And we have, of course, the same corresponding wheels on the other side. So there's 6 wheels total, and this thing actually rolls pretty well. It's very big and beefy, almost like a tank, which I think is so cool. We typically don't have Optimus in like a tank. It's usually, of course, a kind of earth-based truck, but I think this is really, really cool. I do like the huge smokestacks. Unfortunately, they are not blast piece compatible. There is actually no port or a peg to actually attach an effects piece, which has been unfortunate. Also, they're kind of done in that unfinished gray. It looks okay, but I think it would have been better if it was like a silver or gunmetal gray. I think that would have looked really cool to kind of go with the war-torn, darker toned Optimus Prime look. We have the entire, kind of truck bed, I guess you could say. A bit ugly. You can actually cover this up with the accessories, which I'll show in just a sec. I'm actually not a big fan of this entire hollow section, which again, can be a bit covered up with the accessories, so a very minor complaint. If you do look at the back, we actually have one of the biggest complaints a lot of people have is you can actually see the entire arms and hands back there, which is a bit unfortunate. It would have been nice if there was like a panel to cover that, just keep it out of view. Of course, it's at the back. It would have been worse if it was like at the side or the front. So again, a very minor complaint. I actually do have a bit of a fix if you wanted to actually kind of cover up the hand a little bit more. You could actually turn the wrist so it doesn't resemble a hand as much. You don't see the open port or the fingers. I guess that's a bit of a fix. That's really all I got. It can come up with. So other than that, that's pretty much it for the details and of course complaints. Overall, a very solid futuristic truck, I guess tank mode. So now for some comparisons. Here he is, of course, with the G2 laser Optimus Prime from Legacy Wave 1, and I think they look pretty cool side by side. And what's actually really interesting is in the robot mode, this is actually the smallest Optimus Prime with all the comparisons I had, with this one and the Earthrise one. This was the smallest figure, but in this case, of course, completely different. This one is, of course, a bit of a more lengthy Optimus Prime, but this one's really big and bulky. So in comparison, this one is the bigger car, which I think is pretty cool. And now for one more comparison, of course, here he is with the Earthrise one without the trailer. So if you wanted to include that, of course, it would be bigger. But the trailer not included, as you can see, this one's a much bigger truck, which I think is pretty cool. Very big and beefy, which I actually do quite like. Very war-torn, battle-ready, which I like. And let's, of course, have a big group photo shot of all the primes together, which I think looks quite nice. And let me know in the comment section below of all these 3, which one is your preferred or favorites. Let's now get down to the accessory storage. So the Matrix is already in there. You don't have to remove it for transmission, which I do quite like. Of course, if you wanted to, you could put off to the side just in case if you're afraid of, losing it or if the chest opens, all that stuff. But as for the blaster and axe, you can actually store on there in several different ways. As for the blaster, it's actually only one way, but the axe, you can actually split again into 3 separate pieces. So there is a bit of customization options. There is actually 2 2 slots there, and there is 2 tabs on the weapon itself, and you just plug it in, and this really just gives the further image, or illusion of it actually kind of being a tank. It's supposed to be more of a futuristic truck, but honestly, sometimes I can actually see it as a tank, which I think looks super cool. I love the huge, big, beefy wheels and this huge cannon. And again, as my critique or kind of complaint of earlier, it would have been nice if this was done in kind of a silver or gunmetal gray, because it's a bit boring as a black, but a very minor complaint. And I'm pretty sure, as I said before, this is blast piece compatible, so you can actually attach some really cool effects pieces and have them blasting at the Decepticons and Megatron. So as for the axe, so how they show you displaying it is a bit odd. I probably will never use this other than the review. So there is 2 slots right there, and there is 2 tabs on the weapon itself, and it just kind of clips into place just like that. It's a bit hard to align. Just gotta line that up. Just like that. And there we go. So a bit tricky, but there it is. Probably not how many people are going to display the axe. I usually do cut some slack on melee weapons like shields and swords and axes because, of course, they're pretty odd shapes and there really is not, the greatest position or place to put on a truck like this. So it is actually good that it can separate into several pieces because you can actually, of course, put the handles and the axe in other areas. This one actually here has a peg, so you can use some MechTech ports that are on the sides and, of course, on top of the truck. But most likely what I'm going to do is just leave the axe off to the side. That's how I will prefer to display it in this mode. But that is pretty much it for the Cybertronian truck mode. Let's actually get down to taking a look at the included backdrop and, of course, the final thoughts. So now quickly looking at the included backdrop with this figure, it's actually the Kaon prison break, that's what they call it on the packaging. It actually looks super cool, so we actually have the Transformers War for Cybertron logo at the bottom, and of course a little place to put the figure that I'll show off in just a sec. We actually have a really cool background design taken, I'm assuming, directly from the War for Cybertron video game, which looks really cool. I do like all the spikes and the kind of glowing purple energon, the dark energon look. We actually do have, of course, 03, that game controller button there. We have Studio Series on the side. We actually have a authentic Autobot logo at the bottom, and of course on this side we have the Gamer Edition Transformers and that same gamer controller button, which overall looks super cool. And of course the last thing to do is you can grab any figure. I'm actually going to take Optimus because this is his backdrop, and you can place it on the little stand for you to pose or position the figure however you wish, which I actually do quite like. I don't know if I'm going to keep all these backdrops because I typically don't use them, but it's still pretty fun to look at occasionally. But there is the backdrop. Let's now get down to the final thoughts. Now for the final thoughts for the Transformers Studio Series Gamer Edition 03 Voyager class Optimus Prime. I think overall this figure is really good. Starting in the robot mode, love the entire design. Of course, the head, some people have said it's a bit out of proportion with the body because he's pretty big and bulky and kind of short. Understandable, but it is accurate to the War for Cybertron video game, so I do not have a problem. And of course, I love the entire design of the chest. I love the huge wheels sticking out the back with the entire bumper, and of course the huge wheels also sticking out of the back of the legs. He's pretty big and bulky, but I think it looks and really works. I do like the 2 Autobot symbols on the shoulders, both kind of that reddish orange. It actually kind of looks like it's illuminating. I think that's a pretty cool effect. I do have to say I'm actually really happy about one thing. So the original images that were first posted, of course, when this figure was revealed, the chest actually looked a bit more gray, less silver, which I didn't like. It seemed a bit unfinished, but I'm actually really glad how the figure turned out because it actually looks silver in hand, which I'm really glad because I wouldn't have liked that kind of unfinished gray plastic. And actually the gray itself for like the biceps and the top of the legs isn't that unfinished ugly gray. It's more of a darker, almost gunmetal gray, which again I think really works super well. As for articulation, overall pretty good. I think the only thing that's kind of letting this figure down is unfortunately there is no kickback motion with the legs. That's mostly due to transformation. There's actually a huge hinge right above where the legs would kick back, so it pretty much completely limits and blocks it, which is a bit unfortunate, but I've actually been able to put him in some really awesome poses. If you want to see those poses, of course make sure not to skip the intro because they're there, and I had so much fun taking pictures of the figure. I just could not stop doing it. As for, of course, features and accessories, he actually does come with quite a few for a Voyager class figure. He comes with this really awesome battle axe, which I do quite like. If you've been watching my channel for quite a while now, I actually really like the melee weapons, like the shields and the swords and the axes. Always makes me happy, and I think they usually do a really good job on them. So I think the sculpting and the entire design of this axe really works well, but the painting is where it falls short. I think a lot of people do have that same complaint. They were trying to do that kind of glowing energon effect like they did in the video games of War and Fall for Cybertron, on, which is understandable. I think the concept and how they tried to do it did work, but it just didn't execute well because it seems a bit unfinished, unpainted. It seems a bit ugly, but again, the sculpting I think is I think did a really good job at. There's actually 2 separate modes. You can actually have it in the form you see here, but you can actually split the main portion of the blade and fold it back, so you can actually have a huge, giant axe weapon. Hard to describe, but of course, if you probably did see it in this review. So I do like that feature. This is actually 3 separate pieces. You can have it as, of course, this large axe form or the shorter form. I actually probably prefer this one. I'm actually a bit back and forth. I do have one kind of nitpick or complaint. It would have been nice maybe if there was like some storage for the axe on the back of the figure. I don't think he ever did that in the video game, but if they wanted to go the extra mile, I think that would have been a nice feature. Same goes for the cannon or the blaster. Unfortunately, the only way or place you can actually position the cannon on this figure is actually on this arm, because of course there's the whole removing forearm gimmick where you can actually place it there. And I think it does work. I think the entire gimmick does actually really well recreate that feature from the video game. Of course, if you don't know, in the video game you could kind of pick up weapons and the entire weapon would form out of his arm, which I always thought was really cool. And I think they executed well. It's just unfortunate that that's the only place you can actually place the weapon on this figure. That's it. And again, it does look good. So overall, really no complaints with that. Of course, accessory-wise, other accessories, he actually does come with the Matrix, which is another thing I'm really happy about, because the additional images, or the original images, I actually kind of thought you could not remove the Matrix from his chest, but I was actually wrong. You can. I think the entire sculpting and design around the Matrix chamber looks super cool. Tons of wires, mechanical detailing. The sculpting is good, but it kind of like the axe, I think they could have used more paint, because it's all black. It kind of looks like a black blob from certain views, so it would have been nice if there was maybe some gunmetal gray, or of course maybe some silver. I think that would have been a little bit better. As for transformation, it's actually pretty fun. For a Voyager class figure, not that complex. I think it's about 22 steps. I could be wrong. Somewhere in that range, maybe 25. It's pretty fun. A bit messy and challenging at some times. There's been a few panels that would pop off here and there during transformation. I'm actually really happy it didn't happen during this review, so it's kind of a rare occurrence, but overall, very fun transformation both ways. I'm really happy about that. And if you do want to see the reverse transformation, of course, make sure to check out the how to transform video for this figure coming on the channel very, very soon. I'll do, of course, the reverse transformation from this video if you want to see, of course, both ways of transformation. But yeah, pretty simple, very fun. As for the truck tank mode, I don't know if it's supposed to be a truck. Again, I haven't played this game, both War or Fall, in a very long time, so I don't remember a lot of it. I remember I had a lot of fun. And yeah, his alt mode is super cool, really big and bulky, almost like a tank, very futuristic, Cybertronian, alien. Love the design, tons of panels and layers. I do like the really nice glossy red plastic they use, very shiny. I do quite like that. And all the silver, I do love the huge, big and bulky wheels. And again, I just have to say again, I really do like how they ended up on his back. Very accurate, and I think it looks super cool. And it rolls pretty well. He actually has 3 wheels, of course, on each side, so 6 total. Rolls pretty well. Weapon storage is overall pretty good for the, of course, Matrix and the blaster. The Matrix just stays in the same place, no problem with that. The blaster actually attaches onto the back, so again, just really adds further to that entire homage or design of a tank. It really just makes me think of that, which I think is really cool. As for the axe, not the greatest, which this is kind of one of those accessories which I do cut a little bit of slack on, especially when it comes to melee weapons like swords and shields and axes, because typically they don't separate into 3 pieces like this. So I typically do cut a little bit of slack because it's pretty hard to place a, oddly shaped accessory like that. A gun is pretty easy. It's pretty much just a pole or kind of a stick. So it's pretty easy to place on a car and make it look cool. An axe and a shield, that's pretty hard to do. So I can cut some slack there. What you do is you pretty much attach the axe on top of the blaster, which looks pretty weird. If you want to, this axe does separate into 3 separate pieces. You can actually attach them onto some of the MechTech ports on the entire truck, which if you want to, you can do. I think one really cool way they could have stored the axe, which unfortunately I guess they didn't want to take that opportunity, or maybe they didn't think of it. They probably could have found a way to actually attach the axe underneath the truck, because there's actually quite a bit of open space under there. Maybe they could have just attached it to the front of the truck, and of course they would stretch all the way to the back. That's just a thought. Maybe there is a reason why they couldn't do it. I mean, of course they would have to find a place to put a tab or a slot for it to actually work. And it's a pretty big axe, so maybe they didn't want to stick out too much on the side. Maybe there's some specific reason. And of course, the main complaint of this mode is the hands or the forearms kind of sticking out the back. That's a bit unfortunate, but it's actually out of the back of the truck, so you're barely going to see it. I don't think anyone's going to display the truck in that way, of course, unless you're going to do some crazy battle pose or battle scene of all these figures. So not the biggest complaint. It would have been nice if there was like a panel or something to cover it up. You can actually, if you want to, rotate the hands or the fists so you don't see the actual palm or the port, just to make it less obvious and of course standing out. That's really the only fix I actually came up with. I guess it works okay, but that's pretty much it for the final thoughts. Very few complaints. Of course, there's some here and there like they could have done a little bit better. I do actually have one minor complaint, or kind of once, not wouldn't say a complaint, again, just more of a once, or one thing that they really could have done would have been cool. If this was like a leader class figure, maybe they could have put more budget into the paint apps, like they could have done, of course, more paint apps for the axe, the blaster, and of course the entire matrix chamber. But another thing I think they could have done, hopefully they might do this in the future of this gamer edition subline. If you've played the game, of course, either War or Fall, there's a ton of, battles, war-torn. They're usually rusty figures, rusty characters, tons of damage, burns and stuff. Maybe they could have actually put some brushwork or battle damage on here. I know that's a bit controversial with the Transformers community. Some people don't want that. They think it looks ugly, it's bad. I think if they maybe perfected that technique, from Siege, I think they also did that on the premium finish line. If they perfected that to make it look really good, maybe on some of these figures, maybe they could do like a selects rendition or a selects version of this, an alternate version of this figure. Or maybe like a Target exclusive, maybe they can make another version of this with the battle damage. So of course, in case you want more of the clean look, you can get this one. Or if you want more of the battle damage look, you can get the other one. That's just a thought. I don't know. Some people don't like it. I think that would be pretty cool. It would definitely, of course, really, nail the accuracy. Because again, they were War and Fall for Cybertron. There was damage. People were losing limbs, crazy stuff happening all the time. Just a thought. Maybe they'll actually do that down the road. I don't know. But let me know what you think of this figure in the comment section below. I really do hope you enjoyed this review. And of course, I'll see you next time.